Today I'm making 2 sourdough loaves to answer a simple question. What actually makes sourdough taste more sour? One loaf comes straight from the fridge into oven. Another one will get some extra room temperature rice before baking. If you're chasing that famous San Francisco sour bite, this minor detail might matter more than your recipe. We're making classic San Francisco style sourdough using Peter Reinhardt's formula from his book. This recipe is built specifically to develop a pronounced sour flavor, and the foundation of that flavor is a stiff starter. This starter is intentionally firm. It ferments slowly and develops a deep tang and pushes the pellets towards acidic acid. That gives sourdough its sharp bite. Description has all details how to build it. First, dissolve the starter in cool water. This ensures even fermentation across the dough. I use 1 teaspoon of diastatic malt powder in this recipe. This helps to convert starch into sugars, so yeast has food, and the crust browns much better. I start with half the flour first to fully hydrate the dough early to avoid dry pockets. Now I add the remaining flour and salt. Total hydration is about 61%, which makes this dough beginner friendly. I will mix it by hand, but a stand mixer works perfectly too. I mix everything with spatula for as long as it's easy, and then I switch to the scraper. Scrape the bowl and a spatula to clean, and move to the table. This is where the dough really comes together. Here's a simple trick. Cut and fold your dough with a scraper. It mixes the dough faster than kneading and prevents dry spots. This tool saves time and energy. Now I stretch the dough against the table and fold it back. That gentle tension builds the gluten without overworking the dough. You should feel it turn smooth and slightly springy. Lightly oil the bowl so the dough releases cleanly. Now it rests for 45 minutes, and my room temperature is 76 Fahrenheit or 24 Celsius. Here's our first stretch and fold, and the dough is already puffier. Pull the edges up and fold them over. This spreads the yeast and builds gluten and also traps the gas for higher rise. I love this moment. See how quickly the dough puffs up. Feeling those tiny bubbles is one of the best parts of working with yeasted dough. Low hydration dough can tear easily, so handle it very gently. If your dough at this moment looks puffier than mine, just skip further stretches and stop here. Our goal is to keep the gas trapped and protect the dough structure. Another 45 minutes have passed, and it's time for the final stretch. The dough is very puffy to the touch, so I just hold it gently in my hands and fold it over, and at this point, this is all it needs. Cover the dough and let it ferment for another 1 hour. After the final rest, the dough has nearly doubled, so it's time for the pre-shape. Dust the dough with flour, then use scraper to gently lift and rotate it against the bowl. I rely on my never-failing tools, a flour wand and a scraper. This all helps to release the dough cleanly and keeps the bubbles intact. I divide my dough into 2 equal pieces and gently pre-shape into balls. Then a short rest so the gluten relaxes before the final shaping. It's about 10 to 15 minutes. Prep your bannetons by dusting flour to prevent any sticking. Now I'm going to shape my breads into abatards. This dough is easy to work when shaping because at lower hydration, the dough doesn't stick. It makes it very easy to practice new shaping methods. Fold sides of the dough like a letter, then flip it and roll for the tension. Both of my loaves are ready, and I'm covering them and leaving them to rest for additional hour in room temperature before I move them into a fridge. Here's how my breads look after additional 1 hour rest at room temperature, and I am ready to move them into fridge to rest overnight. Next day in the morning, I took out my loaves from the fridge. I additionally wrapped them in the bags because I noticed that the top of the loaves started to dry out. Now is the time when our experiment begins. One loaf will proof at room temperature. The other one goes straight from fridge into the oven. Room temperature loaf goes first. I flip it into parchment paper, score it, and into a fully preheated baker. I preheated my oven at 500 Fahrenheit or 260 Celsius with the baker and baked my loaf for 25 minutes, and then rest of the time I baked it without lid. Here's my fridge loaf. I give it identical score and bake the same way as I baked my room temperature loaf. Both loaves are out of oven. The cold baked loaf is slightly rounder with a taller ear, while the room temperature loaf spread a bit more. Let's take a look. Very even but tight crumb, which is expected at this level of hydration. Cold dough gave a really nice spring. And next, let's cut room temperature proofed loaf and see what's inside. It has small uniform holes and a very soft texture. Let's cut both loaves into slices and see how they look. I am starting from my room-proofed loaf first. And as you can see, it has really small but uniform holes and a really soft texture. Fridge-proofed. The cold loaf is slightly firmer right now. It would benefit from another hour of cooling, but the structure is fully baked. Let's get into conclusions side by side. Both loaves have strong crust and excellent oven spring, but the flavor is different. The room temperature loaf is milder and slightly sweeter because yeast activity accelerated during the final proof. The loaf we baked straight from the refrigerator has a sharper and sour flavor. During the cold fermentation, the bacteria, especially Lactobacillus, continue producing acetic acid while the yeast slows down. And that combination, a stiff starter and a long cold retard, is the foundation of classic San Francisco style sourdough. At 61% hydration, this dough is stable, predictable, and beginner friendly. Same dough, One small change, but two different results. So, which loaf would you choose? Let me know in the comments.